welcome to this special conversation around employee mental health with a focus on work from home versus living at work. This is part of ETPanache Tokyo Heart Out series. I'm your host, Pallavi. Today's session aims to address the new age transition of working from home to working from anywhere, anytime. How are companies keeping up with this well-being strategies? What are the possible challenges of a hybrid workplace and its impact on employees' mental health? We'll discuss all this and much more. I'm happy to be joined by Shraddhanjali Rao, Head HR, SAP India, Partner to the Business, Promoter of Talent and Technology, Sonal Jain, India Enterprise HR Head, Johnson & Johnson, Pooja Bhagat, Vice President, Total Reward, Asia Pacific and Europe, Middle East and Africa, Human Capital, Optimum Global Solutions Private Limited. Welcome all of you on board. Let me start with you, Shraddha. We all know that the last 2 years have been really difficult for each one of us. However, the biggest challenge to overcome has definitely been the psychological part of it, the physiological part of it. What are your initial thoughts on the impact of work from home on employees? What do you think?
I think although the physical surroundings changed, Pallavi, it was the emotional and the mental load that took all of us by surprise, right? The FOMO that started happening, which, about what's happening in the teams with your coffee buddies, the things that never even crossed our minds because we picked up coffees together, we had water cooler conversations. The value and the weight of it is what we felt, right? And at the end, also on the personal front, there was so much of fear of getting, contracting the virus, taking care of family, risk for loved ones, ensuring, responsibilities back at home. Sometimes you even thought about seeing a doctor if, there was a critical reason. You argued yourself over the two risks. So I think what we saw, employees were overcompensating. So not just the physical, the psychological impact was overcompensating for lack of physical presence. It also meant all the individual productivity we saw increased, collaboration, innovation, relationships took a backseat. And I think the whole construct of social concepts that we live in, right? At the end, we are human. We are a society-based set of thought process that got challenged. I think that was very important. The want to stay negative, to be able to stay positive was something that we had to deal with. I think just change of the workplace had more deeper impacts to us, not just in the format, but also in our own psychology. And I think that's something that we were all learning to deal with. But I think we have evolved as well in the last 18 months. But I do hope for a much better and a forward-looking outlook as we progress to the future of work.
Surely we all are very positive on that. Sonal, I want to take your initial comments, your thoughts on this impact of this new style of working, the work from home thing that we're talking of.
Yeah, and I remember a couple of years back speaking to an employee, and there were multiple dimensions of change that were happening at that time, right? So dimensions were around location, dimensions were function, expanded responsibility, and I remember saying, and there was something at a personal level, and I believe that time, how many dimensions of change one can manage, and I think it's been decades and ages and years that we have read stories around multiple dimensions of change as what we have seen in 2020 and 2021, right? Starting from humanity to world, to our societies, so to really our socioeconomical systems. And then our organization, within organizations, our departments, our teams, and then finally our own selves and our families, right? So I think human beings themselves have never seen the kind of dimensions of change that have happened. So I think the resilience has been at the peak. We've not had the templates and tools and framework to say, if tomorrow morning something like this happens, do it like that. I think everybody was learning on their way. And, I personally felt there are a lot of sayings of our grandparents, in our epics that we sometimes ended up forgetting. All of that came true, right? We all heard that reserves are so important. Everything that you save is everything that you earn. We heard about survival of the fittest, and we heard about there are certain areas that you need to adopt and embrace to be thriving, right? So I just felt, and some of it I took as a personal learning, that everything that used to be said, by anybody in the past, actually a lot of it came true. And I'm assuming, and I'm sure this learning will stay with us not just today, but multi-generations from now, because there would be a lot of stories to share. Some would be sad, some would be of separations, and some would be of immense hope And one day, I'm sure there will be joy that we'll be back to the world that we started off living a few years back.
Pooja, would you agree that there would be a certain, back to normal kind of a thing, or is it the new normal? Like, how do you look at this change?
I mean, I think, Pallavi, it's a good time to sort of reflect on what's been happening in the last 20 months. We've moved from work from office to, work from home, and honestly, pretty much now to work from anywhere. Um, Employees have sort of had to adapt to a new way of working, managers, leaders, a new way of leading, and organizations, pretty much a new way of sort of engaging and managing the workforce. And we've had to do it overnight. Now, while this obviously means that there's been more flexibility in how we sort of work on a few things, it has also increased the amount of juggling that we've seen employees have to do, particularly between their personal and professional commitments. And we do also need to recognize the personal changes at home, and the impact of this at home on different employees. With limited or no school to online schooling, for young parents or parents, lesser dependence on on external helpers, which many in this part of the world are used to. In addition, you're sort of living through an evolving health crisis, and still have limited visibility on how the situation will change and when will it end. Closer to home, wave 2 sort of hit India and its people pretty hard, for a lot of people close to home. All of this happening together and sort of adding and building up to the stress and anxiety of employees at this point in time.
Right. In fact, we're talking about the impact on different, types of people or maybe sections. So I want to, take a question from Shraddha as to, according to you, do you think any particular community or sections of the society that have been, more impacted by the adoption of work from home in terms of the mental health? And what are your thoughts, and why is that so?
I think there's a very popular saying that we heard a lot, right? We were all in the storm, but we were not all on the same boat. Our boats were different. Understand, right? The challenges for somebody who had caring responsibilities, specifically exposed, elder parents, multiple issues, already pre-existing health issues were different. Parents with infants had a completely different problem. People who went through pregnancy during the pandemic had a very different outlook, including bachelors stuck in PGs. Now PGs shut down, which were very normal in metro cities, right? We've known people to relocate out of their hometowns. And you'll not believe the number of such people across cities who got stuck. Food could not be delivered. They did not know how to do cooking. Now, as much as we can smile about it, these were realities of life that we had. And there are some times, like I think Pooja highlighted, you had to make a choice of which demon to get, right? Would you get maids and helpers in and expose yourself versus do all this and burn out, right? I think different sections had very, very different issues. And I think one of the things that we did very instinctively was to go back and ask the respective sections, what did you want? Right? Single parents, you will not believe the single parents. I mean, they had nowhere to go. Suddenly, neighbors whom they could count on for their regular life did not happen because now you were stuck at home. You had people whose entire identity was dependent on something like a marathon runner, right? So somebody that we know has been a marathon runner for 20 years, very big, but now you're constrained in a Mumbai apartment. How are you going to be able to? And those dimensions were different. So definitely people had different challenges. But what was really important was to peel the onion a little bit to understand what was most specific to that particular employee or persona's context and provide the relevant support. I'll give you a small example. In the first pandemic round, right, we had migrant workers. So we have a full-fledged kitchen. For almost 1.5 months, we sent out 18,000 meals every day. Because that was the community around us. Our kitchens were operational, our food was there, people were not there, but there were people right outside our gate who didn't have food, right? So a lot of times you had to go out there and say, okay, what can we do? And get creative about it.
Absolutely. In fact, individual personal, priorities change, and a lot of it changed. I want to take a question from, Pooja and Sonal as well. Employee-centric well-being is, it's also a business imperative. So first, I'll come to Pooja. How can leaders and workplaces design a more comprehensive wellness outlook to support employees' mental health? What do you say, Pooja?
Yeah, I think, very relevant topic for today, Pallavi. Mental health needs to be integrated with the company's broader health and well-being strategy. It's not a standout strategy. It has to be part of your health benefits, well-being strategy, whatever, different organizations call it. And, when companies start on this journey, it's very important to spend enough time on defining the purpose of this health and well-being program. Organizations need to try and answer, why do they want to do it, what do they want to deliver, and then how do they want to deliver. And mental health initiatives really need to be clearly integrated within this broader framework. For employees to value them, a couple of things that I've learned from my experience and what I've seen in the industry. First, leaders need to really support and sort of drive these initiatives. When one embarks on a journey like this, it requires a shift in behaviors, and leadership support is essential. It is a key success factor for any such action. Secondly, we need to drive awareness, to do a lot of communication. No amount of communication is really enough in this, and that's sort of been our experience in this. Lastly, it's very important to sort of get that employee perspective and say, okay, what is it that employees are saying on the programs, what's working, what's not working for them. And of course, keeping it relevant to make sure that as needs are changing, our programs and our well-being and mental strategies are aligning to the changing environment around us. And we've at Optum, we've run a health and well-being program called Live Well for many years now. But what Live Well delivered 6 years ago is very different from what it's delivering today. We've adapted our philosophy over a period of time. Our leaders have been a very integral part of this journey. We've purposely kept a lean central team to deliver the program, and really leveraged on our broader community of employees to help. So we've got Live Well volunteers in each of our sites to deliver it. They keep it real, they keep it relevant, they talk about executional difficulties. It's been one of the key success factors as we've transitioned many of our programs from physical programs to virtual programs as well. So it's just keep it real, keep it relevant. Leaders should walk the talk. And like I said, no communication, no, and not enough. There's no communication that's enough communication. It's just important to make sure we talk about this often enough.
Communication is a very essential part of this whole dialogue that we are talking of and how companies are reaching out. But before I get on to the next question, I want to take a view from my other panelists as well. So maybe Sonal, if you could add on, what is your take on this? How are companies and leaders, looking at the current transition, and how are they supporting their employees' mental health?
Sure. And I would build to what Shraddha and Pooja just mentioned, right? I'll again go back to say it's very important to understand who you are and why do you exist, right? And I think that is something which is very foundational that got amplified, especially in the last 18 months, right? So if I go back to J&J, what's our purpose and why do we exist, right? We exist because we believe good health is the foundation of vibrant lives, not just for yourself, but for your communities to progress forward. We believe that we actually serve the most unmet needs of our patients, our customers, our consumers. And that's why we exist. And hence mental health and well-being becomes very core of the part of who we are and why we exist. I'm going to read out just one line of a credo that we follow in J&J across. We say very clearly that we support our health and well-being of our employees and help them fulfill their family and other personal responsibility, which means it's not just about your responsibility to your family, but you might have other responsibilities that you don't want to share otherwise, right? So any responsibility that you have individually, the organization will support you. And I think that actually sets the foundation that it's part of your business imperative. It's part of how you do the business and what it means to you, rather than an additional strategy that you're actually making and doing to making it come alive. And I'll take a little example, and I'm sure multiple organizations experience the same. So when we were at the peak for almost 6 to 9 months, our crisis management team was led by one of the managing directors, the senior most managing director. And, he himself personally every single day went through every single employee history. Of course, in all confidentiality of health records, along with the health services team, to understand what support do we need to provide. What does it mean? It meant to make choices. It meant that there were situations that multiple business agenda had to be put it on the drop. It meant that, we were not doing the regular strategy as we would have done in the year, but we said that comes secondly. What comes most important is our employees, and that's where we're going to spend time. Now, we're not hospitalization experts, but what we could do is really provide that kind of support in the organization personally, and that meant a lot for everybody, right? So two examples that I wanted to give. One is more at an organization infrastructure foundational perspective, because you need to have that. And second is then how does your leaders actually role model? And there are, if the same leaders go back and say, hey, I need business because, and that's also important, right? But I need business. However, having said that, I'm going to carve out this time for this particular thing, right? And so on and so forth. What do you pause? What choices you make? I think that itself is a big role model for us to understand business imperatives. And then, like everybody says, you don't have to build a business case around it. You don't have to build a justification around it. It just happens because who you are matters the most.
Absolutely. In fact, I want to take a quick view from Shraddha as well. While we're talking about these strategies that companies are planning, so this is coming as a sense of realization, or is it like an obligation? Like, what do you think on this?
We've always kept employees at the center of what we've done, right? And we've over the years evolved over it. So when somebody came and told us from the LGBTQ plus community that this is a need, we have same-sex partners covered under insurance. Now, I can tell you that we had to do this before there was a 377, right? Before there was a law. So we've evolved in the right intent. But what the pandemic did was really put us across the board, right? So we were in cold water. We had to figure out things. And I think building on Sonal's point, we had to look at things holistically. So I'll give you an example. We always said, you are family for us. SAP as a brand is a family for you. We care for you. Now, let's take it one step further. We have always given illness leave. That's a part of a regulatory requirement, but it's also for ensuring, health and wellness of our employees. We realized, and this was, I must admit, before the pandemic, that we created a separate category for family care leave. Because we realized it's a lot of people take leave when their family members are unwell and not necessarily when they are unwell. So we said, okay, we'll stay true to our credo, and we will give you this category. Now, I must admit, when we launched it, we had no clue of the pandemic. We launched it in March. So of course, this is the most utilized leave. Now, that gives you an example of how you need to keep the intent right and change things in the process. I'll also give you another example. It was not just about doing this as a HR initiative or, an organizational stance. We truly made our leaders stand up to that. And things like obviously health insurance had to cover COVID or all of that. Really overnight we took care. But small things is reducing meeting time, right? From 30 minutes to 25 on an Outlook. It changes behavior. Telling people you need to take that 10-minute break, right? Having a no meeting Friday, a learning Wednesday. Doing nudges. You'll not believe we did an entire campaign around micro behavior changes, right? Mental wellness was not a topic that was very openly acknowledged. We had our leaders in town halls talk about their challenges. Now, it was not the easiest, but I must admit it created a different level of vulnerability. And when an employee realizes everybody has the same problems, then you kind of open your views to talk to each other, right? A little bit sharing helped the entire load, if I have to say. A lot of things that were done as not just role model behaviors, but something that became inherent and ingrained into our DNA across different levels of the organization. So that's a little bit my take, saying I think intent was always there, but we really had to redesign a lot of things to make sense, right? Be it in terms of leave, be it insurance, be it the way we are structuring our day. How could you be more collaborative? Really listen to people and say what their challenges were.
So in fact, you mentioned about intent that really makes me think, that besides intent, communication plays a very important part, how we are reaching out and, whether people are comfortable enough to speak about it. So my question would be to Pooja, how can companies use communication as a tool to reduce this stigma around mental health and making mental health coverages, whatever plans and policies that are being made, more accessible and, asking people to, come forward and ask for help?
I think, Pallavi, two things. One is, yes, communication is important, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But I think equally important is creating that environment, of mental, of where employees are comfortable and, leaders and managers are sensitized about this, right? For me, it's, communication is just one of the pillars, honestly, but it's a much broader change that, we're seeing organizations focus on now. Of course, you start with communication, regular stuff like leaders walking the talk. We launched a program, called Hello in the midst of, in the midst of wave 2. It was a simple program just meant to sort of build awareness and education on mental health. We had our leaders share their personal experiences, and they volunteered to do this. So they shared personal experiences. We ensured that through those regular communications, we are reinforcing not only what are the different programs that we offer, but where can employees learn more about them and how can they utilize them. We also talked about the fact that, look, this is not just for the employee. At the end of the day, this is for the employee, the communities that they support, the families. We started inviting a lot of family members for a lot of these sessions, and we saw increased numbers and participation over there, right? The second thing is really this whole thing I spoke about is manager sensitization. Organizations need to invest in not only building employee awareness, but also sensitize managers so that they can proactively help in identifying small signs in people's and guide them towards, creating, towards leveraging some of the existing programs, or just help them, mentor them out. I think this is where the lines get a little blurred. Managers, colleagues, peers sort of take the role of friends, mentors, guide. But that creating that that sensitization, that culture of comfort where it's okay not to be okay, where it's okay to talk about this, and frankly it's okay to just put your hand up and say I need time off, or I'm feeling burnt out, I'm feeling stressed. These are all things that we spoke a lot about pre-pandemic. I think there was always the intent to sort of do a lot of this. The pandemic has sort of accelerated some of this, and with some of the programs like the Hello program that we've done, we did exactly this. And it has had a very positive impact on not just employees but their families as well. And then we realized through this, we are we're not only engaging with the employee, but in a virtual setup like this, we're actually engaging with the employees' families itself, which is which has huge value add for us as an organization as well.
Absolutely. In fact, I want Sonal to, speak her thoughts on this. I mean, how does she look at this whole change and this whole thing about communication, and how can this be made a better tool in terms of not just the collaboration part, but also helping people coming up and speak up for themselves. Sonal.
Yeah, so I would just go back again and say, look, it's very important to understand who you are and why you exist, right? And some of these foundational philosophies become far more clearer in a time like pandemic. I would go back and say, if I look back, my personal belief is that some things come by the foundational purpose and values of the organization, which help you make the right choices. Some things actually come by structure and methodologies and templates and frameworks. And then some things come by pure leadership behaviors and manager sensitization. And then a few things happen in any organization, which is by choice, because I relate to the topic, I relate to somebody, I care for somebody. And in any organization, all the four have to come alive, right? They have to come alive through formal channels, informal channels, and channels which actually truly are inspiring them to make a change, right? And that's where the large amount of, I would say, the movement and momentum sort of happens and creates. So for us, I think, again, it goes back to who we are, right? We're committed to have the healthiest workforce in the world. And that's what drives us. That's what drive a lot of our strategy as a part of a business imperative. So very important for us was who understands mental health. Because one is we had volunteers, we had managers, we had employees, we had something called as crisis management team. We also had something called as employee volunteer group, and so on. But we said who otherwise understands mental health, and hence we had something called as mental health diplomats, which is part of our employee resource groups. A really group of, I would say, leaders who are very passionate about the topic. They themselves go through some specialized training to understand mental health and well-being. What are the kind of issues, challenges? They are not trained as expert, but they are trained in terms of understanding what it matters and means. And they are the ones who actually reached out in the organization to enable multiple programs to understand the concept of mental well-being. So again, starting from who we are, making the right choices and decisions, ensuring that our leaders are actually enabling it through what they're saying in a daily life, and then ensuring you have group of people who are very inspired themselves, and then they're making the change, right? So our mental health diplomats actually came quite in front. And we realized, for example, just a small story to share, one of our leaders of mental health diplomat networks, she came to our HR community and shared, how important it is to take care of ourselves and well-being. And something triggered with one of our colleagues in that meeting, and she actually shared her own personal story on mental well-being, which actually created a bit of a cycle, right? The moment she shared, we had multiple other people who actually shared what are the kind of support that they need, what are the kind of challenges. And sometimes when it comes to mental well-being, more than the support, it's just about sharing the confidence that, yes, I have the ability to go through it. I wasn't aware of it, but now I'm good with it, right? So I think that made those, I wouldn't call them beautiful because some of them were very challenging stories, but actually it made the concept look very normal to say, yeah, any one of us, and we don't even know, right? We are four of us on the screen. Who knows that we actually had a mental health challenge or a support in the past? And that became so relevant as a conversation because people said, really, we never could have imagined, and these were head of the functions. We could have never imagined that, you have shared something about like this, which means there is something more and beyond what you look at individuals when you speak to them. So the empathy and I would say support came very much to the forefront.
In fact, I would ask the other panelists also if they have any anecdotes, any personal stories to share. In fact, before that, I want to highlight a survey which was conducted by Deloitte, and this was conducted on over 400 working women. Now, the findings are very interesting. It kind of reveals that, the pandemic, how it affected the women workforce, like their mental health, their physical health, and their own thoughts about their careers. Some of them, thought that maybe their careers are slowing down, or maybe some got some opportunities because of the work from home thing. So, Shraddha, I want to take this one from you. Women are vulnerable now more than ever. Like this is what the survey says when it comes to managing stress and other well-being strategies. So is there a dedicated strategy for women employees? Like on your part, would you like to comment on this one?
Women are a very important element of our workforce. Full stop. I think there's no conversation. You have commitment from all employers today in India. I think the challenge is, I think most companies had employee resource groups, right? You would have a business women's network, you would have the women leadership forum. I'm fairly sure I see my panel members nodding as well. So this was already in place. What turned around, and like you said, the mental load of running a household, as much as we talk about equal parenting, as much as we try to create policies and benefits for equal parenting, it was also what was the reality of a society, in a home, in an Indian home in our society, right? I think that got up. And we've always had structured programs for development, but now we had to go one step further. I'll give you specific examples. We've always had a program for women to move. The pandemic had different challenges. Earlier, they could come to offering. Now, shadowing was not the best when it was done virtually, because that was also difficult. And, so we realized women at different stages of life had different challenges. You will not believe there was a segment of group of women who came to us who had just passed out of college 1 or 2 years, and basically they were all in metros, wherever the work was, and went back home to stay with their parents. Within 2 years, there was now pressure building for them to get married. So they don't know how to deal with that. And this is, you will not believe, this is reality. Had they been somewhere else, they would have had a better say, right? So I'm giving you examples that kind of showed their face in the midst of the pandemic and the setups. Younger kids, women who went through conception, right, to pregnancy, delivery, all those challenges, examples that kind of showed their face in the midst of the pandemic and the setups. Younger kids, women who went through conception, right, to pregnancy, delivery, all those challenges. So we had specific groups identified for where you are in a stage, career stage, and what your challenge is, right? So now you in the house had teenage kids typically going through board exams, and I think as employees there was ruckus out there, right? So we realized helicopter parenting was something that people were, just because everybody was at home, right? You were just overseeing each other a lot more than you would otherwise do. That was becoming a challenge. We had a dedicated, we call it an expert. And I think some of the panel members also mentioned, this is where you really need experts to come in. So we really partnered with the ecosystem, got in experts, did sessions dedicated to women wellness. We had sessions dedicated to women in terms of how to manage workload. Very, very small things, right? How do you get others? And let's also accept that a lot of times we had to do enablement for our managers to look for signs, because I think gender wise the signs are not just different, they also come out differently. So we had to sensitize our managers how to look at burnout signs in women differently versus men. Let me also take a critical example: domestic violence. Now this is a subject that's out there, but as corporates we're not, this was always at home topic, right? This is not something you oversaw, but this became a part and parcel. And if you closed your eyes, then that was that was a really sad situation. So we actually had to find out. We sent out a note, we asked people, we checked on their well-beings, we created a stance as a brand, as SAP. What is domestic violence? What is our stance against it? How do we provide financial assistance, legal assistance to people who need help? We created survivor groups. Never had we thought that that would be the need, but that was the need of the hour. So going back to women, a lot of women said, I'm stressed. Is there a possibility to step down or reduce my workload, manage my workload better? Can I do job shadowing and sharing with somebody else just to help things out? So we had to create a lot of flexible models for both men and women to make sure that this was happening. And not just women, we had younger parents come back, right? We increased our paid paternity to 8 weeks, just so that they could spend time, both men and women, to make sure that this was happening. And not just women, we had younger parents come back, right? We increased our paid paternity to 8 weeks, just so that they could spend time. And, these were things that we learned specifically impacting sections, and for us to design things that made sense for them.
In fact, Pooja, I would like you to share some anecdotes, any stories, that our viewers might be interested in, and they might relate also in them.
Yeah, I think, one of the shifts that we've seen, pre-pandemic, people used to come to office. I think obviously with work from home, office comes to, home now, is one of the shifts that we saw. Now, what it means, I mean, we did see in different, I would say, different parts of our organization, gender being one, age group being another, life stage being another, different needs sort of emerged through, right? What we saw, what we tried to do was really saying, okay, what is the need? Try to peel the onion to understand, children, yes, school going children had online school. After a certain stage, they are more independent. The younger children, for example, we were dependent on the daycare benefit that was being offered. We were dependent on, nannies and people coming to sort of help them. And when you're virtually stuck, especially the first couple of months, you're virtually stuck at home. And I think there was also this paranoia at that point in time. And most people were really trying to stay indoors, not let anybody come from outside. So we said, okay, what is it that you sort of need help in? And they, they came back to us and said, look, it's not just about studies, but, help us with, sort of managing our children, like a virtual daycare kind of a thing. We said, if our women employees are sort of going through this, we then said, we have many employees in our organization who have partners and spouses who may also be experiencing this. So how can we then extend this to, to everyone? And we then sort of created, part of Live Well became a pillar called Raise Well, which really focused on parenting needs, particularly at this point in time. And we created a program called Live Well for Little Ones that had multiple options, right? And a lot of these programs were delivered virtually, so people could choose the timings, they could choose what they want, and more importantly, different age groups, we were catering to different programs, so a lot of flexibility in what they wanted. And through that, we created, the whole focus of this was, okay, yes, help in taking care of the child. Now physically we can't do that, at least till it's safe, but how can we help in part of the online schooling? Is there somewhere we can assist in that? Are there to help children remain engaged through the day? It's another difficult task, especially if they can't get out of home. How can we offer some some sessions? So we did storytelling sessions, and these were calendarized, so you could sign up for multiple sessions in a week, or one session a week. We did art and craft, I mean, different things for different age groups, like I've said before. But we started solutioning around, okay, what is the need emerging? And if we felt that the need was beyond just one group, our intent was, how do we extend it, sort of beyond that there. We also realized that, for some of our existing programs, which we sort of delivered for women, we need to go back to the drawing table, redesign them, rework with our ecosystem, our partners, our delivery teams, to make sure that we're able to deliver. So we have a program called Care 9, which is really for women as they go through the whole, as they go through pregnancy, and sort of help them in a holistic way on nutrition, physical nutrition, overall well-being, right? We realized there was a lot of fear of people, for women to step out during this time. So how do you make this enabled? How do you facilitate this in a way where we offer more and more services at home? And then again, how can we extend it not just to the women who work for us, but women out there who are somewhere connected and linked to us. There was also a lot of online sessions. We are very lucky, one of our in-house companies, Optum, provides a lot of mental health services, so leverage them a lot to say, okay, how can we leverage them more, to do some more dedicated sessions on some of these topics. One burning one example, for example, is that a lot of women came back to us and said, we somehow, in the pandemic, we want to focus a little bit more on financial well-being, right? And it's not to say pay us more, but how do we manage our finances? Can you help us get started on that? Because we had a lot of young women in our workforce, so having some dedicated sessions for that. So we focused on the need, and then from the need we sort of created our solutions, designed them, extended it to population that could leverage it more. And really part of it was really, how can we help our people, our more during these times? And that really was the intent, to help people more, to show that we care, and to let them know that we are there for them during these times.
In fact, as we're talking about designing new policies and considering, their situations, like they could be young parents or, having little kids at home. I want to go to Sonal now. You think there could be possible challenges in an environment where, companies are really trying to balance out the whole thing and maybe set up a hybrid kind of an environment? And how do we keep that well-being strategy agile and scalable and, accessible? So what are your thoughts on that, Sonal?
Sure. No, I'm so inspired by hearing my panel members. I think everybody put out everything that they could. What's the need of the hour, right? And whatever is the need of the hour is, I think, everybody tried focusing on. So couple of things, I think, again, going back to some of the things which are more structurally driven, right? We have something called as, and I'll take some live examples. So we have something called as, I would say, fitness areas. So we actually brought that policy back to home. And we said, if you actually buy a home gym, equipment, we will reimburse you. So we actually introduced something called as home gym reimbursement across for our employees. So, I mean, I have a cycle, a fitness cycle at home. Somebody ordered something else, but it's all about, bringing fitness back to home. The second one that I'll call out is, while it sounds, now so much forgiven, but I think very important was how do you bring technology back to health and fitness? So a lot of amount of work, which I'm assuming every corporate did, was really ensuring that it's not just at your doorstep at a mobile click, but not just for you, but for your family as well. So how do you have doctor consultations 24/7, ensuring that you're able to access all the digital tools of mental well-being and mental health. And while we are talking about it today, all of this requires setup, right? So how do you set it up in a very short period of time for your employees to access wherever they are? Right? So that's the second one. The third, I would say, apart from this, some of my colleagues have already spoken about certain other policies around hybrid, so I won't repeat them, which is around different kind of insurances, different kind of requirements, what are the kind of health webinars, what are the kind of sessions. We also realized that there were actually 2 million girls who got their first period in the COVID time in a year, right? So how do you bring the whole conversation around menstrual hygiene to our employees as well, while we do the enough work externally, right? So we brought out some of the conversations on breaking the social taboo around menstrual hygiene. Recently, we had a conversation, dialogue with our employees around, if you're a father, how do you have the first conversation with your daughter or your sister or somebody in your family who's going to have first menstrual hygiene, right? And that becomes very important. So again, like every other, I would say, panel members spoke about, I think all of us identified what's the need, what's the reference, and what best we can do to provide that help and support. Some could be around awareness, and some could be around policy, so that people are able to use it as much as they're aware of it. And last one I would say is we're rolling out something called as mental health policy, medical policy, which allows our employees, if in case they face a challenge on multiple levels, to actually get insured through treatment, again, at multiple different areas, right? So again, some things by structure, some things by template, some things by leaders, and some things by matter of passion, choice, and inspiration and purpose.
Sure. In fact, Shraddha, if you want to just pitch in and maybe say a few words on the possible challenges before we move on with some more questions that we have.
I think the biggest challenge, and I think Sonal's covered quite a lot, right? The biggest challenge that I foresee is, have you looked at the last 18 months as a fix that you have to fix, or are you fundamentally willing to change? And this you have to have, right, not just at the top, but across the organization, because this will determine where you will go. So when I talk about it, I think structurally organizations have done changes, all in the right intent. But I always believe the last mile experience of an employee with their immediate manager is the actual taste. And what we have accepted as pandemic related behaviors and challenges, when the pandemic goes off, are you still willing to do that, right? The psychological safety that we expect our managers to hold in today's context should continue. So I think the idea is a larger mindset change, and we have to push the boundary. Tomorrow it may be convenient to go back to office, but the question is, do you need to? Can you by default now question saying, are your jobs also by default remotely available or hybridly available? At least take a progressive stance, right? So I think my point here would be, as a challenge, do you force yourself to look and create a world which is better more cognizantly, rather than reverting, reacting, and responding to your situation at this point?
Sure. In fact, there are some more things that I want to bring in here, and I want to go to Pooja now. How are workplaces gearing up to deliver, comprehensive employee wellness programs? You already talked about some of the programs that Optima does, but we're talking about this new way of working, this hybrid world of work. Anything you want to say on that?
I think a couple of things. While we don't know what the future looks like, we do know it doesn't look like the past. I think that's the one thing we definitely know, right? So we have to change the way we are sort of not only change what we are what we are doing, but also possibly how we are delivering it or how we've delivered it in the past. I think moving to a more and more digital virtual platform, that is enabled through simple and user friendly technology is very good. I think that's one of the first things that that we sort of started doing, moving as much as we can to virtual platforms. That helped us, including some of the mental health initiatives. We moved to an app called Sunvelo, which we did globally. It just sort of helps people be more aware and leverage some of the programs inbuilt in there. The second thing is, this is not perhaps something which is only because of the pandemic, but more, I mean, we were already talking about the gig economy and the workers and the millennials and how they how different they are. One of the things they do want is relevance. So we have to have agile and flexible programs that are relevant to them, that they can relate to it. That is really important, because if you don't have them, it doesn't matter how you deliver or what you are doing. If people don't want them, they will not use them, right?
Right, right.
I think that's the second thing about having that flexibility, agility in your in your offerings, that it caters to multiple types of people and their different needs, right?
Yeah.
I think the third thing is that you know wellness, health and well-being, whatever we choose to call it in different organizations, it's moving beyond being a benefit to our to our employees. I think it is really evolving to be a key lever on how we drive engagement
Right,
with the employees in an environment like this. It shows
right.
that we care for them. It shows that we are willing to invest in them, right? Lastly, we have to now, I think one of the changing or evolutions that's happening, that the link is no longer just with the employee, because like I said before, office is going to home now, right? So the link is no longer just with the employee, it is with their family. So we should, we need to make our programs relevant to the employee and their families,
Right.
so that the engagement opportunity is not just with the employee, but it's like a social connect that we're building beyond just the employee, and that really helps in sort of creating that engaging experience, that employee experience that a lot of organizations are sort of talking about now.
Sure. In fact, Sonal, I want to take a quick view from you on your vision, your thought on this hybrid world of work that we're talking about.
Sure. Work that works for you. That's what I would say. But again, going back to the principle and philosophy of who you are, because one of the things that I learned the most and I'm very inspired is during the COVID time, there was less of competition amongst organizations and there was more inspiration. I think not many organizations, thankfully, were running behind to say, hey, we are doing this. I think there was a lot of embracing of what are you doing and what can work for us. Because remember, all of us would be in different industries, our customers, our consumers, because there's a reason why we exist. And why we exist is who we serve. And who we serve is going to be very different for different organizations. So one brush will not fit all. That's my first belief. Second is there would be a best possible opportunity for every organization to make the work that works for them. And third, it's not going to be led only by the organizations. It's going to be led by and co-created by the employees, by society, by communities, and so on and so forth. So for example, when Dubai Middle East goes for 4.5 days, I'm very happy because for a longer time, my husband worked on the Middle East timings, and now we're going to have a Sunday as well off. So we just need to co-create it. We need to make that works best for us, not be in competition, but more in inspiration. And I think if we are in that space, it's going to be a beautiful place in the future.
Sure. So there are a few more questions that I want to, address. So this one's for Shraddha, and I want to understand from you, Shraddha, what can be done to make these programs that we're talking of so fondly more effective? I mean, do you see employees really coming up and engaging with these programs, and do you see an overall improvement in the organization's well-being because of these kinds of policies and programs? What do you think, Shraddha?
Absolutely. I think there was, at the beginning, there was curiosity. then there was burnout, then there was need to see it again, right? So this is very human, a curve that all of us go through. It's called the change curve, right? What's really interesting, and just adding on to what Pooja and Sonal said, one important element is not just us designing platforms and benefits tailored to their needs, but I think we need to move the accountability of moving in that journey back to the employee. Because till some point in time, you can push, but if there's no fundamental behavior change that's happening, that's very difficult to stay on. And that has been a huge focus area. I'll give you a small example. This FOMO that hits us, right? Not knowing, not missing out, because we were all suddenly virtual and digital, email overload happened, right? If you would getting 20 emails, you got 200, and this is for literally everybody, and everybody was all the time on because you were at home, you couldn't go anywhere. Now, although the company may decide a no meeting Friday, are you taking the time and discipline to behave appropriately? Because I think those were concepts that you have to put in place. But I think taking it further, Pallavi, to your question, there are some challenges which we must acknowledge very openly, bluntly. Individual productivity went up, but we do know collaboration and innovation did take a hit, right? Because we have learned to do these two behaviors in a physical format. So we must now relearn. So what we did, and I can give you examples, is we built hacks, these one pagers with very clear behaviors of how you could run team meetings better, right? How could you collaborate in a virtual environment better? How do you collaborate when you have, teams with introverts and extroverts? So they take time in responding and they respond differently. How do you do trust building with people you have had no equation? So if a manager and employee had an equation before the pandemic, they were fine because now everybody was stuck. So we learned our way through. But imagine for all the people who've switched jobs, right? With the resignation wave, there are thousands of them. And how do you build relationship? How do you accelerate building trust? So we really built very, very good one pagers and not more, because we also realized anything more gets difficult to consume, but easy hacks that as an employee I should put in place, as a manager I should consume, and I should live, including digital exhaustion, right? How do you just close yourself down for 10 minutes? How do you create a space, one chair in your house where your family does not bother you when you need your 10 minutes quiet time, right? These are very small but behavioral changes that we are initiating, both creating awareness, sensitivity, but I think that ownership. I have to find what works for me because that's the only way it can survive. At this point, we have stereotyped, we have categorized, we have segmented, and we've done with the right intent. But if we have to make it long term, the ownership of me finding my balance is very true and needs to be driven.
So far, we've discussed, at length about employee well-being. But Pooja, I want to take it up from you. What kind of change do you see on the organization's well-being and the entire discussion that we just had?
I think, organizations are evolving, and how we are coping with this is evolving. There is no, correct answer. Let me put it this way, right? I think, like Sonal said earlier, the better part of the pandemic has been that, we're not in it alone. And, organizations need to now realize that some of these topics are not, they're not HR or benefits anymore, right? They are at the heart of what is important for business and for business to deliver, which is why you have, if you see, there are a lot of shifts in the way leaders are we've seen in leaders towards these topics. You see, Sonal mentioned in her organization, one of the leaders was senior managing directors was sort of leading one of these task forces. I'm pretty sure, that it's happened in other organizations. It happened in our organization as well, right? When wave 2 hit, it was not the HR business partners coming to, rewards and saying, okay, we need this, we need that. It was actually business leaders saying, this is what we need, right? Today, business leaders want to understand, okay, what is your health and well-being strategy? How can we, what is the best use of our investments in health and well-being? So I think from an employee, from an employer perspective, from the other side, the biggest shift has been on how we are seeing this transition from this being a benefit to really being a business imperative, a business priority. And it's very, it's very good to see that, because at the end of the day, the impact that, that these policies, programs, health and well-being strategy has, impacts employees at a very personal level, and they're able to relate to the organization at a very personal level, which is very important in creating that connect in a virtual environment like today.
In fact, as we are moving towards the end of the conversation, there are a few things which are very important to discuss. And I want to take this one from Sonal. Instead of making workplace more comfortable, the circumstances of today, they've kind of risked making homes much less comfortable, if I may say so. So do you think employers, they need to acknowledge the extended use of employees' homes as part of their collective strategy in dealing with the economics of the pandemics? I mean, what are your thoughts and maybe your closing comments?
Sure. I think, yeah, definition of workplace is changing, right? Definition of work is also changing. And definition of what do we do and how do we do it is also changing. Right? Definition of who are we going to work with is also changing, right? Because your accessibility of talent will be very different in the new world than an old world, right? And it's almost looks as if we've crossed a decade on a time machine. But those are going to be different, right? So I think the employee-employer relationship in terms of the physical space, emotional space, and the mental space is going to be very different. However, having said that, some foundational elements will always remain the same, right? They're not going to be different. And I personally believe, and I really hope that, we just remain very true to the foundations of what human lives and human living is, because that's not changing, right? So a couple of things, for example, elements around ergonomics, right? So if you have a hybrid working model, how do you support your employees who actually need it more than the entitlement, right? How people who need it, what's going to change? Like we said, we're very, very heartfelt of our gym equipment reimbursement policy, right? And when you have a gym equipment, you are not the only one who's going to use it. There are going to be others as well. Also, just letting people be, right? So letting people be in terms of whatever works for them, because we've had colleagues who were actually staying in one room apartments or two room apartments, not very comfortable, because almost everybody in the family was in the same family. So how do you provide that space to say, hey, there's no competition, right? There's only an embracing of what matters to you and what's more important. Right? So I think just being empathetic to where people are working from, what they are working, how are they working, who they are working with, I think becomes even more relevant, because we always had a conception that when you leave for office and when you come home, these are two separate lives, right? Now the two becomes a lot more merged.
Yeah, the lines have already blurred. So
they're very, very blurred right now, right? But even in those blurred lines, what remains sort of distinct, because there should be things which remain distinct. Otherwise, we won't be able to manage the whole world again. And then what remains blurred? I think acceptance of it. And I want to reiterate some of the things that Shraddhanjali and Pooja shared. It's a lot of co-ownership. I think whenever we move back, and we are moving back from pandemic to endemic, I think it is a lot about ownership. It is not about, oh, I'm going to parent everybody. Everybody's mature, everybody's individual. I think having the trust that people can make the decisions. If they can make P&L decisions, if they can make team decisions, they can make decisions for themselves. So having the trust and enabling people to make the right decision is something that I believe, again, as a part of hybrid working, as a part of bringing homes to work and work to home, right. Understanding that would be very good.
Lastly, I'll take thoughts, closing comments from each one of you, but I want to go first to Shraddha. How can work be made more interesting, social, fun with all this virtual setup that we're working in, so that stressed out employees, they do not work in isolation. They feel that they are part of the system, very much participating, and that shouldn't result in burnout. So how can workplace relationships be made more stronger? I mean, your closing comments, Shraddha.
I think there's a whole lot of opportunity. And again, I see a lot of companies have done a lot, right? From simple things like celebrating milestones that are important in each other's lives, right? It could be service anniversaries, it could be birthdays, a family day. And I'll give you this example. We're very famous for our family days. And actually, the kids like it more than anything else because they actually physically come to our campus. There's clowns, and, we have a big, nice Bollywood star performing and all of that. And it's been something very close to people's heart. Now, obviously, we couldn't do that in the pandemic, but we did it virtually. We, broke it into different elements so that it is not from, morning to evening, because people have limited now mind share. We had a different section for kids. We had a different section for older parents, parents who wanted Hindi songs, or black and white songs. We had a singer there. So I think you find ways in which you can make things interactive, not just for celebrations, but I'd ask you to redesign work. And you have this opportunity. When you're looking at work, can you pair two people in the team naturally who otherwise may not get an opportunity, right? That way you're making sure that your new member in the team is getting a platform to work with somebody more closely, not just out of their regular door, but can you put this in the design? Can you make sure for every hire that you have, you 100% have a buddy and a different mentor, right? To imbibe into the culture. Do you put smaller things in place? So I think it's about redesigning how work is structured, how you give people multiple opportunities, but how you make water cooler still work in a 12 and a 14-inch screen is my sense there. So
sure. In fact, Pooja, I just want to take closing comments from you on how to make work more interesting and how to build these relationships, work relationships, much more stronger. We've seen a transition, and there's a lot, I think, that has to be done on part of the companies and the decision makers. Your closing comments.
Yeah, I think, Pallavi, we've had to, like everyone else, sort of go back to the drawing board and rethink, on how this equation, how this engagement model is going to work in the new setup. And you pretty much, like everyone else, had to do it overnight, and that too globally, right? Um, I think we're seeing interesting things. For example, we've got a fairly young population, likes action and focused on different things. So we said, how do we get to know what is it that employees want to really focus on, right? So we started this thing called as tree of resolutions, right? So every Jan, and we did this last year, we intend doing this again next year. So we said, okay guys, what is it that you want to focus on in the next year, right? Your tree of resolutions. We started with leaders, sort of sharing their resolutions, did a lot of communication on the hub, different social medias, email, etc., creating excitement and hype around this, right? What we got was a lot of information, right? And it talked about employees' personal interests, right? So we said, how can we use this to sort of, help? How can we get our, use this information to help our leaders and our managers? What we were able to do is we were then able to sort of cull out, up to a certain level in the organization and say, you know what, these are the broader trends that we've seen, the interest that we've seen in your in your teams, right? And we gave this to the top 50 100 leaders that we have in a 30,000 organization like us, 30,000 people organization like us, and for them to then sort of plan, some partnering with us, some partnering with whoever they need to partner with on activities that are team building, engaging, etc., like that. We also saw what are big themes. So for example, physical fitness was a big theme, right? So we said, okay, what, like, let's join the global bandwagon on virtual walkathons, right? So created some hype on that. We saw food was another common thing. So we said, you know what, instead of doing cooking classes and all, let's do our own master chef, a virtual master chef. And we said, again, involved families, so wives and all. Then it became so successful, we were then said, can you do one for children? So we did like a children's master chef. So different kind of things like these to sort of create regular connect points, touch points, right? I think what we need to realize is that the way forward to work on this is not for each of us as organizations to sort of work individually. I think there's a lot that a lot of companies are doing, but really leverage forums like these and others to sort of say, how can we address this, together rather than individually, combine our, our experiences, combine our learning so that we're able to manage and address this together rather than being alone in it. At the end of the day, I think, there is, we all want the same end goals, right? We all want us to, shape the future of the workforce in a manner which is sustainable,
Right.
relevant, business friendly, and most importantly, helps, enhance the employee experience for all of us.
Absolutely, because that amounts to the organization doing much more well. It was indeed quite motivating and a positive interaction. Thank you, each of the panelists, for taking time out and discussing this important topic of mental health, especially in a scenario like this. Thank you very much for being part of this conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.